Times Square, Wall Street, the Brooklyn Bridge. You've seen New York's skyline in 1,000 photos, but nobody ever showed you what's buried underneath it. Blood. This is the real history of New York, the one they never put on the postcards. Today, we're gonna find out how this city was really built, how much bloodshed it took, and how many lives were sacrificed to raise it from nothing. Long before it was called New York, this land was called Mannahatta, island of many hills. For thousands of years, the Lenape people lived here. They fished these rivers, hunted these forests, and moved with the seasons. No walls, no borders, just land, shared and sacred. Then, in the early 1600s, ships appeared on the horizon. European ships. And the story of this island, the story of blood, greed, and empire, was about to begin. In 1609, explorer Henry Hudson, sailing for the Dutch, charted the river that would one day bear his name. Between 1624 and 1626, the Dutch West India Company built a trading post here, New Amsterdam. Legend says the Dutch bought Manhattan from the Lenape for trade goods worth about $24. But historians say it likely wasn't a sale at all. The Lenape probably believed they were sharing the land, not giving it away forever. That misunderstanding or that lie would cost them everything. By 1643, tensions between settlers and the Lenape had turned deadly. Governor Willem Kieft ordered a night attack on Lenape refugees camped near the settlement, seeking shelter from tribal conflicts. Dutch soldiers crossed the river under cover of darkness. What followed was a massacre. Men, women, and children killed in their sleep. This came to be known as Kieft's War, one of the bloodiest chapters in New York's founding, and a warning of the violence still to come. The Dutch didn't just fight for this land, they built it on forced labor. As early as 1626, the Dutch West India Company brought enslaved Africans to New Amsterdam. These men built the roads, the docks, and yes, the actual wall that gives Wall Street its name. Slavery wasn't a footnote in New York's history. It was one of the foundations the city was built on. In 1664, the English seized the colony without firing a single shot, renaming it New York after the Duke of York. Under British rule, the slave trade only grew. By the early 1700s, New York had one of the largest enslaved populations of any city in the American colonies. Behind the growing wealth of merchants and traders was a system built entirely on human bondage. In April 1712, enslaved New Yorkers rose up. A group set fire to a building on Maiden Lane, then attacked the colonists who came to put it out. 9 settlers were killed before the militia crushed the uprising. The punishment was brutal beyond words. At least 21 people were executed. Some burned, some broken on the wheel, others left in chains as a public warning. It was one of the first slave rebellions in American history, and one of the most violently suppressed. 30 years later, New York was gripped by paranoia. A string of fires and rumors of a citywide conspiracy sent the city into a panic. In the trials that followed, built on shaky testimony and fear, nearly 200 people were arrested. 34 were executed, 13 of them burned at the stake. Historians still debate today whether a real conspiracy ever existed, or whether the city executed dozens of innocent people out of pure hysteria. When the Revolutionary War reached New York, the British turned old warships into floating prisons, anchored in Wallabout Bay off the Brooklyn shore. Thousands of American soldiers and sailors were crammed below deck, given rotten food and almost no clean water. Disease spread fast. On some nights, a dozen men died aboard a single ship. By the time the war ended, More Americans had died on these prison ships than had been killed in every battle of the Revolutionary War combined. An estimated 11,500 lives lost, not to bullets, but to starvation and neglect, floating just off the coast of a city still being born. By the early 1800s, New York was growing fast and growing ugly. The neighborhood known as 5 Points became one of the most dangerous slums in America. Poverty, disease, and gang warfare ruled its streets. Violence here wasn't the exception. It was daily life, and it was setting the stage for the deadliest riot the city had ever seen. In July 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, New York exploded. Furious over a new draft law that let the wealthy buy their way out of service, mobs took to the streets. What began as anger over the draft turned into days of racial violence. Black New Yorkers were hunted and attacked, and the colored orphan asylum was burned to the ground. By the time federal troops restored order, the official death toll stood at over 119, making it the deadliest riot in American history. New York's rise as a global city came soaked in blood spilled by its own people. Massacres, slavery, executions, riots, and this was only the beginning. The skyscrapers that would soon rise above these same streets, the bridges, the tunnels, the subways would demand a new kind of sacrifice. Men falling from steel beams, workers buried alive underground. That story, the blood behind New York's most famous skyline, is coming in part 2.